Hi everyone, and welcome to a new kind of video. If you haven't been paying attention, I recently uploaded a video called An Intro to Cinema Mode with a bit more of a clickbaity title than that, but really, that video, you should watch that video first. This video is going to be a analysis, rundown, commentary, director's commentary, DVD commentary of that video, running down some of the decisions I made in the process of creating that video and doing some things. If for some reason you haven't seen that video, watch that video. But what I do in that is I take scenes and moments and gameplay from certain games, and I basically add a cinematic touch to that. And what that means is, you know, I don't just... There are games like The Order 1886 and Evil Within that attempt to create a parallel with cinematic standards, where they have letterboxes, which are the black bars on the top and bottom of the screen. They have film grain. They run at a lower frame rate. Sometimes it's not exactly by design. But what I did was movies run at 24 frames per second in a variety of different screen formats, not just that letterboxed widescreen. So I wanted to kind of apply that mentality to different games and see what they would look like if they were created with the same standards that films were created with. And not just that, but also messing around with the color correction, the filtering, the audio, turning off all the HUD so it really looks cinematic and immersive, so it really looks like a movie. So yeah, right now I'm going to be running through that video, the games I cover in that video, and that includes some spoilers from that video, like from games like Last of Us Part 2 and Fire Emblem 3 Houses. So if you want to avoid spoilers, again, watch that other video first to see what you want to see, and just keep that in mind, and let's get it started. This is my cinema mode. First of maybe many. So we're starting with Last of Us Part 2, and I'm actually going to stop right there, just right when it fades in, because as you can already tell, you know, you have the letterboxes, the HUD's off. But the nice thing about Last of Us Part 2 actually is that, like, a lot of the HUD is reduced or off by default when you're not in action, which I think is a really nice touch. But something I did here that you may not notice is the color contrast is much higher. There's a mode in, there's like a filter in Premiere Pro that basically makes the color correction look more cinematic, and that was kind of an easy catch-all. But what I also did is I went into the color filtering and I made it so areas where the main characters are kind of underground or in enclosed areas, the filtering is a bit more green, and that's something I remember the first game kind of doing, is just having this green, grimy filter on it. So I really wanted to amplify that. I'm not sure if that's super noticeable, but I'm sure if you looked at it side by side, you would really be able to tell the difference with the color correction here. And yeah, it's running at 24 frames per second, so it is a little... It's one of those things you don't even notice until you're really looking for it. And then one thing I did here is when Ellie exits enclosed areas, I actually transitioned to reduced color filtering. And I actually, the whole thing actually has reduced color saturation to kind of make this feel, you know, we're in a post-apocalyptic world, but it's still a very colorful game. And so I kind of wanted to strike a neat balance between, you know, vibrance and desolation, I guess, where it's still beautiful, it's just, you know, post-apocalyptic. You may notice a lot of compression here too, and yeah. Again, I also added some, like, I think I added some grain to it as well, because the first game had a lot of film grain, so I kind of wanted to just add a little bit of that to this. And here we transition to a cutscene, which is really where you see this concept of cinema mode shine, where it really looks...
Didn't think I'd ever see you again.
Cinematic. So for this scene, for all the scenes in Last of Us 2, some games like Red Dead Redemption 2, their cutscenes are letterboxed with widescreen. There's actually a huge controversy in Red Dead Redemption 2 because originally all of the cutscenes were made with full screen in mind, but later they changed their mind and wanted to do it widescreen, so they had to reframe all of the scenes. And I had to do a similar approach here where I kind of had to like take it, resize it, drag it down, drag it up, depending on where the focus was to make sure things weren't being cut off by the letterboxes, because this game was made with full screen in mind. But I think it lends itself really naturally to being letterboxed, as we'll see in a later scene.
How'd you find us?
I asked about a dude with a bitch scar across his face.
It's funny.
I really had to reframe this. This one, they really had his face up in the top. So what I did, I actually got it and tilted it at an angle. I'm not sure if it's this shot or there's another shot where he has the knife out. But I had to tilt it so everything was in frame. You know, his expression, her expression, the knife, so you get the full effect. You don't need to see the whole knife because you get the sound effect and you see it pressing against your throat. So you're surprised. I was surprised at how much you kind of can lose in the letterboxes and you still get the intended effect.
How many came with you? Just you two?
Oh, and for this scene, I actually, kind of a weird frame here. I actually color filtered it so it was more blue than green. Or I added a blue tint to it.
You can't stop this.
Jordan! You're supposed to be out looking for the other one. What the fuck is it?
Yeah, the grain is super noticeable here.
You know the smuggler that we killed out in Jackson?
Yeah.
I actually think this is a really well-framed shot because you get the kind of dynamic going on here where you have this guy with his gun holstered, you have him in the chair towering over Ellie, who's still kind of in a position of power because we know what she's capable of, but, you know, we're kind of passive in this situation, just watching. I think it's a really well-directed scene. And especially here because this is a very long shot, what we're about to see here. This is a very long, it really sweeps in from this side all the way to the right side, all the way. It doesn't cut for a while, and you'll see. And so to reframe I had to reframe this shot, and so I was surprised at how far back I had to go to drag it down to reframe it so the final thing isn't out of frame.
Coming after us. That's why Nick was fucked up like that. We gotta get her
In the process, you kind of lose a little bit of Ellie struggling, but again, you get the sound effects and kind of the visuals of her struggling, so, you know, you still get, yeah.
Hold on.
Yeah, right here is where I had to reframe this entire. This was tricky because, again, like I said, this shot is really long, so I reframed the entire shot to fit this blocking right here. And I really like this shot too because you're really seeing it from Ellie's perspective.
Let's figure out what she knows.
I don't give a fuck what she knows. You saw what she did to the others?
You have no idea how many people she might be with. This might be an ambush,
I don't care
Mike.
how many people she's with. We will find them and we'll kill them.
Can you just think for yourself for a quick
Jordan, get
second
the
right
fuck
now?
out of
Can
my
you?
way.
It still hasn't cut, and cut. You know, that was a very long shot, especially for like video game cinematic standards. And you may notice something coming up. You may have noticed something in the original video, but when I started recording this, I had accidentally left the HUD on, and I didn't realize it until I started getting button prompts. I'm like, wait a second, that's not supposed to happen. So I actually went back, turned all the HUD off, and then restarted the scene, and it started me in kind of an awkward spot. So you'll see something, let me just, right in the middle of the water, where the glass fell. Yeah, see how it kind of faded in? That was where I edited in the new footage where there was no HUD. And it surprised me because I realized, like, the lighting is all done in engine. That's what I realized. I'm like, why is the lighting different? It's like, well, because when I restarted it, maybe there was a cloud overhead now. So that only made me even more impressed with Last of Us Part 2, even if it meant I couldn't get some very good continuity. I had to kind of do some editing trickery to make sure it looked continuous. But it just made me impressed with the tech of Last of Us Part 2, that this cutscene is technically in engine, but that's because it also shifts to gameplay, because here you would normally have button prompts, but I turned the HUD off, so I had to kind of remember what buttons to press. But it looks really good without the HUD. You really, like, look at the ropes. Yeah, it looks great. Despite the things going on. And this, I think, making this widescreen and kind of having that zoomed in focus made this even more disturbing because you really get that high. It's already a pretty close-up shot, but when you have it, like, when you add those black bars and you really increase the focus on what's in the middle, it's even more kind of graphic and disturbing. So I actually think the widescreen actually kind of enhances a lot of the cinematography in this game. And then here you'll see a neat little crossfade, because I actually did I did multiple takes of this. Yeah, there's the fade. I did multiple takes of this, and I thought this was the best take, so I wanted to have that. And so to do that, I had to crossfade. I love what I do here. The blood splatter, oh, it's so gross. And then here, especially, you actually notice the game glitches there, and his arm kind of, his detached arm kind of gets sucked up into his body. I left it just because I thought it was a good, I don't know, it felt like very natural choreography that I liked, and I thought the impact of the moment was still intact. And also you see him kind of like writhe around after. Yeah, oh, this game is great. Okay, so here I actually touched up the audio a little bit. I made it sound more like they were in an abandoned school, like in hallways and stuff. And so you'll notice there's a bit more echo, and that's because I added some stuff there. This was a tricky set piece to do. The first time I recorded this, I actually didn't get any audio because it was going to my headphones instead of the capture card. And I had a really good, well choreographed action scene here that I was so disappointed that I lost. But I still like what I got in the end. Especially for one moment that, you know, if you've seen the original video, you probably know it's coming up, that I really, really liked. And it was tricky playing this game without the HUD. I missed a lot of shots. You're seeing a lot of the gameplay cut, and that's just because there's a lot of it is just like embarrassingly bad. That's one of the things that you'd have to keep in mind when doing a cinema mode like this, is like the game gets significantly more difficult when you don't have a crosshairs. But it just makes it that much more immersive, and it feels a lot more natural when you just miss shots. Because, like, yeah, I am missing here. You have to focus so much. I actually found myself getting kind of exhausted playing these games without much HUD because I had to focus so much on, like, the button, remembering all the buttons, the prompts, the, you know, ammo counts, and no crosshairs, so you have to focus on what you're aiming, where you're aiming at. I tried to not use listening mode either. So it really is like you're playing it at a harder difficulty than you normally would. It would also be interesting as like an optional difficulty setting, not just like a video setting. Crossfade here. Again, I just kind of want to show a bit more of the quieter moments in this game. I didn't want it to just all be action. And yet again, I applied the hallway filter here. The audio. And it's blue. I made it so it's a little blue and gray.
What about this?
Then actually the audio and the color correction changes right, I think right here, yeah. Yeah. I think in hindsight I should have reduced the film grain a little bit, but I actually kind of, I don't know. The reason I added it was because I wanted it to be kind of like evocative of the first game's visual style.
Alright, coast looks clear.
I think the framing, and I did a lot of work with the framing in this scene because again, this game was made with full screen in mind, so I had to kind of adjust a lot of the framing to work with letterboxes. But it looks great. I think the end result looks great. Some of these shots look like almost like they were made for widescreen in mind. And I this is another one I had to kind of mess with because normally they were a bit higher up on the screen, so I had to drag them down to fit in the bars. But I really like the result.
Jordan, Isaac's got us posted up on a 2-week at the TV station. Scars spotted in the area. Here's something to hold you over, Leah.
TV station.
Yeah. Like, this just looks straight out of a Hollywood movie, this shot right here. With just the the rule of thirds going on with the cinematography, the letterboxing, the depth of field. Yeah, I think it looked really good. The end result in this scene in particular looked really good. I was really happy with it. Yeah, just about every single shot in this scene was reframed. And one last little action sequence. This is a funny detail right here. I aim and then I trip over this body. I didn't even mean to. I didn't know that was something that could happen. So I thought that was kind of a neat detail. And here we go. Battlefield 3. This one was something I was really proud of the end result. I'm not sure how people will feel about it. Maybe they're a little disappointed that I went this route with it instead of maybe the traditional, you know, letterbox, whatever. But I wanted to kind of recreate the perspective of like you're seeing found footage from like a military head cam from Afghanistan or something. And so some of these shots, I actually like, if you know, don't blink for a while and kind of don't look at it really closely, it almost looks real. And I was really impressed with the results of this. And this is by adding a lot of different effects. I also filtered the audio. Again, that's one of those things that maybe people will be disappointed by because DICE's audio design is always amazing. But for the visual effects here, I really decreased the I really desaturated the video quality. I kind of like spherized it, if you notice. It kind of like rounds at the edges. It's kind of hard to notice unless you're really looking for it. I really wanted to give kind of imitate the experience of watching through like a fisheye lens almost. And then I added like a ton of grain and like I wanted this to feel like a 480p digital camera from like 2006. Even though the game takes place in like 2010s.
50 meters midway up. He's dug into a spider hole. I got AT. Give it to Black. Shit, cover's getting ropey. See that weapon glint? You waste him. Make it count.
Now this part was funny. I actually the reason I cut there is because I forgot the weapon prompt and I had the HUD off. So I went back. I'm like, turn the HUD on. What's the okay, R. Okay, back off. Hold R. Okay, come back.
Clear your back blast. Stand by. 3, 2, 1. Suppress it!
Now this scene was funny because I think I actually did a better shot than the game was expecting because I shoot it right through the window and you see the rocket go through the window, but it explodes underneath it, and you'll see here coming. Yep, you see a bullet go by, and then you hear the scream, the death scream. So I don't think it. I think the game had to script the death because I don't think I actually killed him with the rocket because I aimed too well, I guess. And this shot come right here when I unpause right now. I was super impressed with this result. This almost looks real, like photorealistic. Again, photorealistic in quotes because it's meant to replicate like a standard def head cam. I probably could have cut this down a little bit for time, but I wanted to get the full earthquake. This was such a mind-blowing scene when this game was new. And then here, I do something really cool. Or I really wanted to show the spectacle of this earthquake, so I changed it to more traditional cinematic widescreen. As like the kind of ending, like, ooh moment. So I hope you like that one. Okay, so Demon Souls, this one was weird. This is from the initial gameplay video from the one of the early PS5 reveal events. I don't actually own the game. This is not me playing right now. This is a trailer that's published that I went and did stuff with. And the filtering here, basically, my thought process going into this was making it look more like the PS3 game, which is funny because the game itself actually has like a PS3 filter. I don't actually know what it looks like, but this was my interpretation of like, I want to make this from a color perspective look more like a PS3 game. So it's a bit more brown, a bit more gray, a bit more gritty. But the lighting in this game is so good. It's like, it can make even gross next-gen PS3 filters look good. This is one of those that I wasn't really sure what to do on. And I'm not even sure if the end result is good, but it was just more, here's my interpretation of if I had to make this look more like a movie. Also, I don't know why you'd want to play a Souls game at 24 frames per second. But again, if you just really want that cinematic feeling when you play a Souls game, if you don't really care about dying too much. And this, I had to do something sneaky here. You'll see it goes white for a split second. I reframe the shot because it's one continuous gameplay shot the whole time. So if I reframed it for one action sequence, it would screw it up for everything. You'd have to reframe it every time. I would have to cut a lot. Whereas here, I don't cut. You know, the game gives you this tiny little fraction of white, full white screen. And so I use that opportunity to reframe it so you can get more of the boss in the shot. Which leads me to believe that maybe this game shouldn't be widescreen, maybe a 4:3 or some other screen format would be better for a Souls game like this, so you get the full vertical spectacle of enemies like this. So maybe I think this is one I would want to redo if I was doing it again. But this was one of the first ones I touched. And this is another one where, like, I thought about doing gameplay for this. I know I was a little disappointed too that I didn't get actual gameplay for PS4 Spider-Man. I'm gonna pause real quick. But I just had the PS4 version, and if I'm going to do gameplay, I want the prettiest possible version, and that's the PS5 version, which can do 60 frames per second with ray tracing on. And yeah, and I actually think this has some of the most noticeable it's in 24 frames per second, not good moments in it. Because there's a lot of... It actually kind of makes me a little motion sick in a way. Just like, I almost can't even look at the screen because it's so choppy. But I wanted to demonstrate that. I wanted to show that. And have that effect pass on to other people to show, like, maybe 24 frames per second, you know, it kind of has to be natively implemented, or you have to think about it when you have these long tracking shots of, like, you're really going to notice the 24 frames per second, especially if you're on, like, a high refresh rate monitor or a TV screen. And maybe it is just because of the export, or, like, yeah, there's so many factors. I don't know why it is that choppy. Like, is it because it went from 60 to 24 frames per second? Is it because it went from 30? I don't even know what the frame rate of this video, the initial video was. It's like, was it because I took it from 30 to 24 or 60 to 24? Is it because the export was weird? Is it because the shot itself does not lend itself naturally to 24 frames per second? Is that something they should think about when they shoot or when they frame certain scenes a certain way? Because they don't literally shoot these scenes. They have it's a digital camera. But the framing I really liked. I had to reframe a lot for this, but I think other than the frame rate, this looks really good. And for the color filtering on this, I made it warmer. I added a bit more of a orange tint to it because I wanted to make it feel a bit warmer. I don't know how to explain it, my process, just like a bit more vibrant and warm. And I wanted the light from the window to really shine through, so I increased the flare a bit too. And it's specifically for a shot that's coming up. Why I added those specific filters and flares. Yeah, you really notice the color differencing here. Yep, this was the shot that I had to reframe this. I increased the glare and the flare, whatever, the saturation and stuff like that. So this is kind of the piece de resistance of the entire clip. And you'll notice the widescreen cuts off a lot of the cinematic cut in this. So that's also something they'd have to think about if you were designing a scene with widescreen in mind. But other than that, it didn't interrupt the scene very much. I had to reframe a little bit here and there, but overall, it lends itself pretty naturally to widescreen. Especially this. This is great in widescreen. Yeah, I really like this. I just wish I would have kept going, you know, but I wanted the PS5 version if I were to keep going, so So, okay. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert here. If you have not played Fire Emblem Three Houses, I recommend you skip this part. Because I don't know why I chose this scene in particular. I think it's just because it's very action heavy and it's very cinematic, and I really like the animation, the facial animations of the characters, the action in it. So, and there's one particular thing I do in this that I was actually surprised. I'm like, wow, this is a missed opportunity on, like, I don't know why they framed it like this when they could have framed it like this. I'll mention that when I get to it, but for now, spoiler alert. One of the pivotal scenes in the game. Most pivotal scenes. So, I'm someone who was a little disappointed with the direction and the styling of Fire Emblem Three Houses cutscenes. It almost looked like they were rendered or animated in like animated at 24 frames per second, because there's a lot of weird like skipping and stuff like that. I don't know. It's hard to explain. It was definitely animated at a low frame rate, and you can tell. So I think making it widescreen in 24 frames per second and making it look more like a big budget anime movie really helped this cutscene, like really helped the cutscenes of Fire Emblem, and that's why I included it in the video, because I think it actually makes the cutscenes look a lot better. Yeah, I had to reframe a lot of this. Love that. Right here. I was amazed what I did in this. I reframed this, even though I didn't have to. But what I noticed was that the spear in the original scene is a lot higher up. And what I did is I made it so the spear cuts exactly halfway through the screen. And that's one of those things that I noticed. I'm like, why wasn't it that way to begin with? That's like, I don't know. It's one of those things it seemed like common sense. While I don't know. So I reframed it so the spear cuts exactly halfway through the screen, because I think it just looks a lot better, in my opinion. I think it, I don't know, adds a layer of dimension, maybe symbolism to the scene it didn't have before. Maybe, you know. The scene does lose something in the transition to widescreen. You'll see it right here. Right here. In the original scene, without the widescreen, he has a smile, and you see that smile, but you can't see that because of the letterboxing, so you really have to, so what I did is I just zoomed in on the eyes to really show his expression in the eyes to maybe get some of that emotion across in a different place. So yeah, that was a interesting scene to touch. Okay, Battlefront 2, this one was a difficult one because I did multiplayer, and it was really hard to get clips that were a decent length and had decent footage because it's a multiplayer game. It's super unpredictable. There were some scenes that were really cool, but only lasted 30 seconds, so it wouldn't make sense. You know, it felt very jarring to just throw those in. And there were some scenes that were really long and cool, but there was nothing interesting happening. So I tried to find a nice balance of multiplayer clips where it was visually intense, interesting things were happening, there was some action going on, but I wasn't getting shot every 2 seconds. It was really hard to do. And again, this is another casualty of, like, I was recording with headphones on, so I lost all the audio. And so I had some really good clips that I was really sad that I had to get rid of, because there was no audio. And I could have just dubbed music over it, but it wouldn't be the same without the sound effects. And this is one of the few games, this is one of 2 games in this video that I don't touch the sound design on, because I thought DICE did such a great job. Normally, I was like increasing the bass levels of certain games to make the hits and sound effects more impactful, a bit more surround sound-y and cinematic. But this I didn't have to touch because it already just sounded so good, because DICE is the best when it comes to sound design. I think they're the best when it comes to sound design in the entire industry. It's so good you don't even really think about it. And so I think they're often overlooked when it comes to award season for audio design. But yeah, this one, I widescreened, added some grain. I tried to make it look a bit more like the movies. And what I do here actually is for the original trilogy scenes, I add a bunch of grain and I kind of try to make it look a little older. I decrease the saturation a little bit. But for the you'll see coming up, the prequel scenes, I make it try to look really clear and modern, and kind of what George Lucas was going for with the prequels. This very sleek art style. So here I tried to make it a little more grainy. Whereas I think the next scene you'll see coming up. Yeah, I tried to make it look super clean. I don't know if that comes across due to the compression or whatever, or maybe I just forgot to turn the grain off. I don't know, but that was my intent. And that's something I would really like to explore more if I were to do more Star Wars clips. Yeah, here especially, just I really tried to recreate the prequel. But again, like DICE did such a good job with the art style of this game, you almost don't even really have to do any of that stuff. You don't really have to add any effects in post. They already kind of nailed the visual aesthetics of every era. And there are no sequel trilogy scenes here. That's not like spite against it. That's not me throwing shade at the sequel trilogy. I had footage for it. It was just in the, there was no audio, so I had to get rid of it. But there was some really good stuff, like Kylo Ren footage that I was so sad that I had to get rid of. I like this, like seeing the stormtroopers going by. Just feels very cinematic. Love the sound effects. And I debated whether I should show the death screen or not, but I'm like, it's too good. This was one that I was really excited to do, Ghost of Tsushima. I was very excited to do Ghost of Tsushima. And I think the end result is really good. It's a bit compressed, I think, just because all the particles in this game, but I think the result is pretty dang beautiful. Because the game is already so cinematic. It's already trying to replicate samurai movies. And I'm playing in the expert HUD mode. I don't know if you could turn the HUD completely off, but I thought the expert HUD mode was a nice, just throw that on, you're good. I think this is a nice compromise between, I think this, you'll notice the subtitles kind of cut under. I was playing in Japanese. I could have switched it to English for the purposes of the video, but oops. But I actually wouldn't mind this being a permanent mode in Ghost of Tsushima. Because you have the Kurosawa mode, which kind of does the same thing, but it's all in black and white, so you miss out on the really beautiful color and art design of this game. Award-winning art design of this game. And so I think having something like this would be a really nice compromise. Which is why I wanted to do it. Yeah. This game is just so naturally cinematic. And I'm also playing on lethal mode. Classic. I like that. That felt very movie-like. Getting tossed around. Oh, this, I sheathe my sword not knowing there were more enemies, but then I pull off this sick headshot. Yeah, I really like the way the colors, the light really... I really increased the saturation for this, because this game has such a beautiful color scheme. Of the whites and oranges and reds and yellows and greens. And the cinematic camera angle when you're riding a horse too, how the camera kind of goes to the right of Jin a bit. You know, it's very cinematic, very film inspired. So this game was very naturally predisposed to cinema mode. And I included this. I messed up here, but I thought this was just a nice, cool cinematic fight. 1v1 fight. I had to keep it in. The whole thing. Yeah, this standoff and the leaves. Watch this. Yeah, the leaves blowing in the wind. Oh, I love that. I'm like, no, I have to keep the full fight. No cuts. Except for that cut. And he's all muddy because I was rolling around on the mud. Do a little bow. That's like disrespect him by leaving him face first in the mud. And I also wanted to show some nighttime scenes. Yeah, it's night. One last good standoff. Just because there's 3 guys, it was perfect. I know I showed a lot of standoffs in this, but I'm like, how do I not show this? And I do a little fancy camera work here. Whoa. Yeah, and then I love the physics of this game. Like, they did such a good job with the combat in this game, where like The people don't just like flop around when you kill them. They legit kind of stagger a bit and we're like, oh no, you got me. And then they fall. Oh, this is just beautiful with the lightning. Oh man. I wanted to get more sunny day shots of this game, but this game's weather system is so dynamic. It's hard to get B-roll for this game, kinda. Especially because this is after I had beaten the game, so the encounter rate was pretty low compared to when you're still playing through the game, because, you know, you've beat everyone. But here, I don't stand off, I do that. This is the longest stretch of uninterrupted gameplay I have, where I don't cut. But I think it looks really good. Yeah, see what I mean? How they just kind of stagger around and then they fall over? Amazing detail. Sucker Punch did such a good job. And then I do the best thing I do in this whole video here. The stab. Yeah. This game is so good. I don't really know what to say. Like, I didn't do a ton other than just make it look even prettier. You know, and make it 24 frames per second. It's pretty much the only interpretation I had, was just make it pop more and make a widescreen at 24 frames. Okay, so Battlefield 1, this is probably the game I did the most work on. As you can see here, I changed the aspect ratio, I made it black and white, I added a ton of grain. I wanted to really give it at least the look of like a 1930s movie, even though it takes place in the 1910s. But I just really wanted to show, but then when he flashes back, I wanted to give you that. It seems a little, counterintuitive to go from black and white to color, since it's technically going back in time. But I really wanted to show just like, I really wanted to make this have a ton of impact and weight and like, you know, just make it look as good as possible, because this is a very epic scene, you know? I don't know what other word to describe it with. It's very epic. So I didn't want to leave it in black and white 4:3, even though I could. And that's something I have it. I have a version of this scene that the whole thing is in black and white, so maybe I'll show that too. But yeah, I ultimately decided to do black and white first, then color, because I really wanted to display the epicness of this scene. And because the gameplay is also widescreen in color, even though I could change the gameplay to black and white 4:3 as well. I also increased the bass on this a bit to kind of add a little more ambient sound, because there's a lot of like weird ambient noises going on in the background, so I kind of wanted to increase that kind of like in the background to really feel like epic. And then you may have noticed in the original video, I actually, the whole clip is kind of lower volume until that punch and the audio goes back to normal, because the compressed sound is part of the scene itself, but I really wanted to add impact to that punch when the sound becomes clear and it's like things are messed up, you know. So I tried to enhance that effect a little bit. And the gameplay, I don't know what happened here, because it looks very compressed. And yeah, I did add grain because I still wanted to give it that kind of old-timey feel, but it got so compressed. And I don't know if it was that way with the native recording. I recorded this using OBS, or if it's just because of the effects and the export and then YouTube compression. Yeah, like right there's so much compression. So maybe that's just a casualty of the decisions I made. Maybe it was because the recording was botched. I honestly don't know. But if it, just pretend this looks really crisp with a hint of grain. And that was the intended effect. One thing I also really appreciate about Battlefield 1 is that Battlefield 1, I didn't have to go into the console and be like, UI off. There was just a mode in the options that lets you turn the HUD off. Thank you, DICE. It's like they knew people were going to do something like this to this game. And people have been making Battlefield machinimas for a long time. And I think that's why they had that option, so you could do a bit of more of like a camera theater mode going on. But I really appreciated it for the opportunity it gave me to do something like this instead. of just like recording the game and doing some movie magic to it. Because the game actually works really well without a HUD. It's super intuitive. It's like almost, I would go as far to say like a better experience. This, you'll notice me botching the shotgun a bunch because I have no reticle. Also, something I do a lot in this footage, later on in this clip at least, is friendly fire, because it's hard to tell who is friend or foe. Yeah, I love that. The guy coming in and bayonet charging him. Had to keep that in. The tank is a little weird because you can't even really tell I've done anything to the screen format with it, because you're in this enclosed box already, and so making it widescreen, like, you hardly even notice. But I think with the effects I added, it looks really nice. I think like the post-processing effects I added look their best in the tank. Because I think you are kind of like, you're not getting as much compression, and so you can really notice some of the interesting things I did to this footage, like increasing the sharpness and film grain. Oh, this ruined the shot. This tank shooting in there kicked up all this dust, so you couldn't even see what was going on. I was like, damn it. And like half that footage was covered in fire because the tank in front of us burst into flames. Unscripted. So it like ruined, that whole tank sequence was like pretty much ruined. But yeah, this part was a mess because I didn't remember the button to take off the gas mask. So I was like, ah. And here, yeah. I like that effect. So yeah. That's everything in this video. I hope you enjoyed this commentary. I hope you enjoyed the original video. Again, if you haven't checked that out, please check that out. I hope you gained some insight from this video into my process. Maybe if it's something you want to experiment with, maybe this gave you some ideas. I don't know, and if any developers are watching this, that'd be interesting. Maybe they got some ideas too of something they should implement, avoid, you know, maybe this is a bad idea, maybe this is a great idea. I have no idea. This is merely me just throwing this energy out into the universe and seeing what happens, seeing how people respond to it. So it's something I'm really proud of, something I really want to do more of, something I already have a huge list of games I'd love to do this with. I just settled on this list of games because I just wanted to get it out, show people what I was working on, and yeah. And so with that, I'm gonna call it. I have a couple more videos on the way that aren't cinema mode, but I'd like to keep working on cinema mode. And so yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.